If you are a person who thinks that SJWs or diversity or feminism ruined this movie, or if you're going to tell me that I'm a Disney shill, or if you're going to tell me that I should watch a 5-hour rant by some angry guy on YouTube, or if you think I should kill myself because I liked a movie, but everyone should just remember, this is a film about space wizards intended for children. I'm not saying you shouldn't take it seriously.
Firstly, there was a clear agenda by Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson. There were 3 male characters with flaws and 4 female characters without flaws. This isn't only a bad agenda, this is just bad writing. Hero characters or characters in general need flaws. Those flaws need to be developed, and they need to grow and change as a character. And none of this happens to anyone in this story. Secondly, it doesn't matter if it's intended for children. Actually, the intentions of the creators are irrelevant. What matters is the final result. This is a space opera franchise. There are plenty of stories that are not only good for kids, they're also good for adults. And combining your audience is rather difficult, but that's what makes something even better than if you make it for one audience. As well, this series also has a list of scenes that are quite violent, which are definitely not intended for kids, if you were to ask any parent in general. And thirdly, how is this a defense for what you're going to be talking about? You're saying this is a show for kids. Okay, so why should we care? What does it matter? Does that mean adults shouldn't take this movie seriously? And if so, should we completely neglect your opinion since you and I are both adults? Why are you shooting yourself in the foot here, Mr. Patrick?
And you know what human beings are not? Logical.
Oh, right, yeah. Human beings aren't logical. I'm also very curious if kids can understand the concepts of Aristotelian logic, nihilism, drinking unpasteurized alien milk, the complexities of a space war economy, hyperspace tracking, hyperspace ramming, or relativistic kinetic kill vehicles, and various other technological, political, and militaristic terms. I'm curious, Mr. Patrick, what do you think children know, and at what age should they be already aware of these things?
Just maybe don't get too angry about it.
Okay, so should I take this movie seriously or not? Which one is it? Should I take a movie intended for kids seriously, but I should not get angry about it? What are you talking about? First off, I already have taken it seriously and have discovered it's a piece of crap because it has bad storytelling, regardless of whether the intended audience was for kids or not. Secondly, I'm pissed off that the franchise is now ruined, as any fan of the series who actually uses their brain will tell you. Thirdly, stop contradicting yourself.
We're not talking about gun control here. We're talking about a movie about space wizards intended for children.
Patrick, what do you want from me? Do you want me to take it seriously, or do you want me to see it as a children's movie? Which one is it? You can't have both. Do I turn my brain off or on? How can I figure out what the hell you're asking me to do? If it's just a children's movie, then why are you taking it seriously? Patrick, please stop contradicting yourself, and please tell us what we should do, oh great and insightful movie critic.
But honestly, I just love this movie.
There's nothing inherently wrong about enjoying or even liking bad things. The problem becomes when you start extolling its virtues, when the rest of the general population who looks at something and says, oh yeah, that's not very good. Now, I don't mean that from a view of opinion. I mean that from an objective series of observations that I've made about the movie. Now, if you say you enjoy a stick in the mud, it's your favorite game, okay, that's great. Good for you. More power to you. You're enjoying the simple things in life. Cool. But once you say it's better than other games, like, I don't know, soccer or online gaming, without actually doing the effort of comparing these things, you're not saying anything. You're just giving your opinion that has no weight. There are reasons we have standards of quality by trying things, by experiencing things like movies. That's why we have a review and rating system for movies. Your opinion has no value if you don't compare your standards, your criteria, to other things. Hopefully to other science fiction stories, because if you did, you'd realize you could be wrong and you could be sounding like an idiot. To those of us who have already done this, have already compared things, you already sound like one. And I don't mean that to insult Mr. Patrick. I mean that to describe him. He looks very foolish.
The Force Awakens is pretty good. Yeah, it plays things super safe and basically just hits all the beats from A New Hope, but the movie had to do 3 things. It had to feel like Star Wars again, it had to introduce new characters that we wanted to follow into future movies, and it had to bridge the 30-year gap in the story.
Well, I'm glad Mr. Patrick's expectations were met. Good for him. Fortunately, this has nothing to do with the purpose of a Star Wars movie. Now, there's a few things that a Star Wars movie should have to do. They're not this massive ironclad expectations, but this is how genre works. So firstly, it has to be a science fiction or sci-fi story, depending on your definition of a term. 2, it has to be a space opera. And 3, it has to be a Star Wars movie. That's kind of generic, but that's it. This is what moviegoers of a given franchise within a space opera subgenre or the science fiction or sci-fi genre expect. Someone's list of subjective opinions or expectations of how something should feel, that characters need to continue in future stories or bridge a gap of years or 30 years or whatever, that's irrelevant. For example, take the Rogue One movie. That apparently didn't feel like a classic Star Wars movie. It felt like a war movie. The tone is not necessarily a thing in science fiction or space opera. Just look at the latest incarnations of Star Trek and the Stargate franchises. The tone is completely different. The feeling is off, or different at least. Now, The Force Awakens didn't even need to be in the same universe as Star Wars, provided it told a good story and it met the standards of genre that existed within its subcategory, and then within its own instance of a subgenre, which is the Star Wars style of movie. It could have gotten away with anything.
It did ridiculously well at the first 2, and with the third, it did okay. It's a little frustrating that we don't really know what the political landscape of the galaxy is. I don't need to see Snoke, a Star Wars story, to understand who that guy is and what his deal is.
Oh, so you haven't seen The Last Jedi yet?
I just wanted something new.
So Mr. Patrick is saying even though his expectations weren't met because those expectations were apparently secondary, he really just wanted something new. Which sounds exactly like he's making up a bullshit excuse to argue after the fact that what he got was still to his liking, even though his previous video about his expectations is now pointless. Fantastic. Even he can change his opinion on a dime, no matter how much meaningless thought he put into it.
And also, of course, I wanted a rip-roaring good time.
A slow-motion car chase that takes 2.5 hours with a bunch of series of side plots. Rip-roaring good time. I don't recall anyone telling me that the movie was exciting. I do recall them saying it was a downer, but again, this is all anecdotal.
And that is exactly what I got. Right from the opening scene, I could tell something was unique about this movie.
Something unique doesn't need to be good. Quite the contrary.
I applauded it for being different!
It broke new ground!
The movie begins with a space battle that is seriously one of the best space battles in the entire series.
Bombers that act like sitting ducks and get turned to pieces instantly by one kamikaze TIE fighter ramming into 3 of them does not make a good space battle. What happened to the other X or Y wings or the A or B wings? What kinds of ships are these? It's as if this entire bomber ship design came out of nowhere just to show how horrible a spaceship this was and how brutal a battle could be made with it. Better still, if they used the real ships, the First Order would look actually menacing. They'd be a threat. But no, everyone has to suck. It's like sending cannon fodder rookies to fight in the front lines against tanks that just ram into people and mysteriously self-detonate. In fact, this entire space battle is a series of incompetent actions on both sides, especially by the First Order. Why didn't they deploy fighters alongside the orbital bombardment when attacking the rebel base? Why are the other Star Destroyers just sitting back when the First Order clearly has superiority and could have helped the Dreadnought? Why weren't they first attacking the escaping ship, which is a moving target, but did the ground base instead? Then there's not attacking the lone X-Wing that's in combat-ready position. We can go on here, but it's possible that Patrick hasn't seen the space battle that was Rogue One to make a comparison in what space battles in Star Wars can be, but hey, neither have I. Now, for an excellent video taking apart the military behavior of the parties in question in The Last Jedi, check out King Emperor Penguin's video in the link is in the description.
She becomes the star of the movie. Paige's desperate attempt to drop the bombs is more suspenseful and more emotional than anything in a battle scene since Luke's trench run.
It really just makes me laugh at the ship design. Why they're so large and slow, why they need to fly so close, why they need to use these ships instead of the actual, real, useful ships like X-Wings and Y-Wings, why you need a remote control to drop bombs instead of a console or voice commands or whatever, how bombs are dropping at the rate upon when they would explode based on the distance to the target. They would probably damage themselves as a result of dropping them. The amount of bombs or even the ships that are needed, value needed was maybe one rack full and one entire hangar. I mean, this is a series of logical jokes that a science fiction story, and yes, that's the parent genre here, that a science fiction story needs in order to explain everything making sense. And it must be logical in order for every scene in a science fiction story to work. It needs some believable detail, usually in the form of tech or technology. It needs people using that technology in believable and efficient ways. That's why you have technology. If we see a bunch of knights in medieval times clad in full plate armor and they're going to war, we don't expect them to start wielding brooms or machine guns. Technology has a purpose and a function and a sense of believability about the time it's taking place in. And the bombers in The Last Jedi are horribly misplaced. All to have some melodramatic scene with a sister dying and to stylistically mirror World War II, the bomber videos, all because of this guy.
And I've noticed a lot of people don't want that. They don't want new things in their Star Wars.
Well, I don't see why we wouldn't. We just want them to make sense first and not screw up the continuity of the story or the series. We also don't want them to be a bloody, stupid concept like having a portable detonator to drop bombs that gets lost and there's a whole struggle. It's just, this is stupid. I mean, the design of this ship and everything in it is dumb. If the thing is portable, if the detonation of bombs or the dropping of bombs is remote, why even get in the ship? Just send a droid out or autopilot it or remote control the thing from another ship. I don't know. Forget bombing and use lightspeed ramming and just...
I love that this movie finally shows us how the 1% live in this galaxy. It finally gives us an idea of what Obi-Wan meant when he said,
"Strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine."
Firstly, it's a break in continuity that Force ghosts can interact with the physical world by summoning lightning. One of the major holes in The Last Jedi. If they could do that, Jedi would have been killing and blowing up the Empire all throughout history or driving the Sith completely bonkers. Secondly, if you're looking toward Yoda doing this, that has nothing to do with Obi-Wan. Either Obi-Wan was just kidding around or speculating he could summon lightning, or Mr. Patrick is simply wrong. Thirdly, Obi-Wan was referring to how his death forced Luke to make the choice to take on the Empire, even destroy the Death Star through Obi-Wan's psychic influence. He also could have been referring to how this caused Darth Vader to change his mind, as Luke was such an influential force in Vader's last moments, even causing the defeat of the Emperor and thus the Empire. But that's some pretty clairvoyant speculation there. There's no real evidence of that. So to speculate that into an event of 40 years in the future involves some other Force ghost, I mean, that is completely wrong.
it gives us great new Force abilities that feel like natural extensions of what we've seen before.
Okay, how is having two-way Skype communication millions of light years away an extension of what Obi-Wan feeling the death of millions on Alderaan is? I mean, Leia clairvoyantly sensing Luke? I mean, how is that an extension? When touch, sound, and matter, like water droplets, can be transferred over massive distances, having a weird feeling of millions of voices screaming across millions of light years, and having two-way communication and teleportation of matter and energy across millions of light years, that might be a little bit different. Where did force projection occur throughout the movies? And again, also being able to do so through millions of light years and transmitting data. When did Force Ghost summon lightning? Or are you trying to tell me Obi-Wan sitting down on a log is the basis for Yoda to pop Luke over the head with his staff and summon lightning is an extension of that.
And speaking of the Force, no other movie explains it as well as Luke does here.
I don't even think that's factually true. I think Luke was only trying to subvert the concept of the Force. I think Yoda does the best explanation, and in much more detail, in a much more mystical and inspiring way, which is one of the purposes of a Star Wars movie, which is good versus evil, and the philosophy you understand therein. In The Last Jedi, Jake is nihilistic. He may as well be talking about gravity or electromagnetic forces or any other natural phenomenon that the Jedi do not own. It makes no real difference because Rey technically learns nothing, aside from cracking rocks, which apparently teaches her how to lift an ungodly number of boulders at the ending somehow.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Not only is it a bad scene, it's a bad payoff to what we can't even understand how A equals B.
To quote an email Jonah Hill once wrote describing a Jump Street Men in Black crossover, it's clean and rad and powerful.
Last I recall, Luke describing the Force as an old, angry, bitter man is neither clean, radical, or powerful. He's dirty, nihilistic, and weak, in case you weren't paying attention about this serious movie intended for kids.
The giant alien cow thing that Luke milks is one of my favorite additions to this whole series.
Okay, let's imagine that Jake drinking the alien milk is a form of characterization. He's so distraught with his life that he's abandoned society and is trying to survive by himself on a reclusive island with fish nuns. Even though there was a map made just to find him, but that's not important, him drinking could be this determination to stick to his nihilistic principles of not getting involved, that he just doesn't care about health or everything else or whatever. Unfortunately, this is contradicted when he said he just came to this planet or island to die. You don't need to come to a reclusive planet to die. This means he needs help. He's looking for someone to help him, but we don't exactly know why. It doesn't make sense. Rey doesn't even know that. She leaves because she's not getting any of his help when he kind of needs her help, or anyone's help. So how's this taken seriously movie for kids doing for you, Mr. Patrick? Are all the kids following along? Because if adults can't understand this guy and this scene, which I don't know what's going on here, what chance do children have? Are these scenes for kids? I'm going to go with not so much. But the most important part of this commentary for Mr. Patrick isn't that he likes the scene. It's what comes after.
And if you don't like it, no offense, but you have boring taste and I don't want to be friends with you.
Here is where we get Mr. Patrick's character. This is something a child would say to someone at recess. Oh, you don't like Charizard or something, so I'm not going to be your friend. It sounds at best of what a juvenile young lady would say about anything in a social media post or something said to her other potentially non-friends anymore over the iPhone. I mean, it's juvenile, it's childish, it's emotional, and it's why I'm stopping analyzing the rest of this video. Patrick is a child. He thinks emotionally, and thus, if you don't, well, you're wrong. You can't use logic to make sense of a story, even though he uses logic to explain himself, even though he believes humans aren't logical, yet we clearly created the concept and various other kinds of logic. And really, this is just a pile of subjective nonsense. Just look at this guy. He's wearing shades indoors and thinks he's cool because he finds some quality in The Last Jedi, which is good. His parents are somewhere in the frame, but now it's just him thinking how good he is, how great his ideas are. When they're nothing more than a child, we shouldn't take seriously. Well, guess what, Mr. Patrick? I can find quality or good points in a pile of crap too. Much like his previous video where he says you can find plot holes in just about anything. I can find diamonds in the rough in even The Last Jedi. But that doesn't mean the majority of The Last Jedi wasn't a pile of bad storytelling. One thing does not invalidate the other. And we certainly do not need an emotional child telling us what's good and bad by insulting our intelligence, telling us to turn our brains off, telling us that logic doesn't even exist or shouldn't exist in humans because it's not in our nature or some nonsense, and that we're watching movies wrong. Mr. Patrick is a petulant little man, trying to be relevant in his emotional musings, blinded by some ideology of some other or some politics, and I'm assuming some sort of academics that gives him a sense of authority to say this crap. Mr. Patrick, you see this movie only through your own lens, with your own blinders, without reason. That makes you an egocentric child. And I'm not going to take you seriously, because you are not taking yourself seriously or the media and opinions you are trying to promote.